Did the American Civil War actually begin right here in San Francisco? Okay, I'm going to go with no, but hear me out because it's not quite as crazy as it sounds. This is the story of the last great American duel fought right here between a U.S. Senator and the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm a writer and tour guide here in San Francisco. I've lived in 5 countries and visited a lot more, but when I come home, home is San Francisco. This city is full of stories, and today I'd like to share one with you. Are we sitting comfortably? Good. It's time for the story of the Broderick-Terry duel.
After California joined the Union, the new state was more and more bitterly divided over the question of slavery. Back east, northern and southern states were drifting closer and closer to civil war. Back then, like today, the Democratic Party controlled California. But the Democratic Party back then was a very different creature from what it is today. Lecompton Democrats, sometimes known as chivalrists or chivs, they largely held sway, and they were avowedly pro-slavery. On the other side of this divide was the newborn Republican Party and a small faction of Democrats known as Free Soilers. Now, California had entered the Union as a free state, but the chivs wanted to change this. And in fact, California had some of the harshest laws for African Americans outside the Deep South. Any white person could claim a black person was an escaped slave, and the black person wasn't even allowed to testify in court in their own defense. Then, on September 7th, 1859, the chivalrous scored big wins in California elections, capturing every major office in the state and control of the legislature. California was primed to become a slave state. Into this mix, let's meet our 2 protagonists, both friends and Democrats, but on opposite sides of the chivalrist versus free soil divide. United States Senator David Broderick and David Terry, Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. David Broderick was born in Washington, D.C., and by all accounts, he was no saint. One of his biographers describes him as a hard-hitting, corrupt politician who would handpick people for high office and then get them to use that office to reap huge financial rewards, passing half of that money back to him. But he was ardently anti-slavery. David Terry came from Kentucky, and I guarantee you he isn't what you think of when you think of a Supreme Court justice. This was a big man with, let's say, anger management issues, and he was known to carry a Bowie knife under his coat, and on at least one occasion, he used that knife in a man's neck. Still, let's not caricature him. He was also a prominent early supporter of women's rights in California. In San Francisco, and let's face it, pretty much everywhere else, our heroes and villains are rarely picture perfect. This division over slavery splits the Democrats in 2 between the chivalrists and the Free Soilers. Then comes that big election of 1859. The chivalrists score big wins, but Terry isn't even nominated to return to the court. He blames Broderick, who had questioned Terry's electability. Maybe something to do with slavery? Maybe something to do with that stabby-stabby thing. Terry is furious. He rails against Broderick, says he's a traitor to democratic principles, even suggests that Broderick is conspiring to set up a black supremacy government. Well, Broderick responds with some choice words of his own. He says of Terry, "I have hitherto spoken of him as an honest man, as the only honest man on the bench of a miserable, corrupt Supreme Court. But now I find I was mistaken. I take it all back. He is just as bad as the others." The back and forth between the 2 men spirals out of control. Invective heaped upon insult, until at last Terry calls Broderick out to a duel. The practice of dueling was illegal in San Francisco, so the 2 men agreed to meet south of the city, in this small canyon just south of San Francisco on the morning of September 13, 1859. Terry got the right to pick the weapons, and for those weapons, he picked .58 caliber dueling pistols with hair triggers. Now, Broderick was known as a good marksman, but he had never seen these weapons before, while Terry had been practicing with these weapons for months. At 6:40 a.m., the two men faced one another, hearing the pronouncement of the rules, including the instruction that firing should commence on the words "Fire 1, 2." At 7 a.m., Calhoun Benham, one of Justice Terry's seconds, gave the signal, but on the word 1, Broderick's gun went off, possibly by accident, the bullet striking the ground about 5 feet in front of him. Terry returned fire, shooting Broderick in the chest and puncturing Broderick's lung. Broderick's friends brought him to this house at Black Point, now known as Fort Mason, owned by his friend Leonidas Haskell, where 3 days later, David Broderick died. In a city of only around 60,000 people, 25,000 attended Broderick's funeral. The courts acquitted David Terry of assassination, but the court of public opinion took a different view. Large numbers of Californians viewed Terry's actions, shooting to kill after what was widely viewed as a hair-trigger misfire, to be at best distinctly unchivalrous. His name was forever thrown into ill repute. Terry fled California for a time. He lived in Mexico. He fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. He eventually returned to California, but the end of his life gives true meaning to the biblical injunction that he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. He met his end after striking a U.S. Supreme Court justice. The justice's bodyguard, fearing that Terry was reaching for a knife, gunned him down. But that's another story. In any event, Terry's close association with the pro-slavery movement destroyed credibility for that movement. Many Californians felt that what he had done to Broderick was little more than an assassination. In 1861, just 2 years after their sweeping victory and reeling from the scandal of the Broderick-Terry duel, as well as fallout from the start of the Civil War, California Democrats were almost entirely swept from power. So, did the Civil War begin right here in San Francisco? I think that's a stretch. The same tensions that were tearing apart the United States were certainly being felt here in California, but whatever effect the Broderick-Terry duel might have had on the views of Californians on slavery, it seems unlikely that this duel affected what occurred in the rest of the United States. The Civil War officially began with the attack on Fort Sumter in April 1861. But in California, some still say that the first shots of the war were those fired in September 1859, right here in San Francisco, between David Broderick and David Terry. Are we still sitting comfortably? Why? The world is full of stories. Get up, get out, and explore your world. Today's whiskey is an Ardbeg Dolce.